So I'm back on Route 66. Last year I did a whole series of videos on Route 66 when I went from Chicago all the way to Santa Monica, California, and I find myself back here today and exploring some ghost towns, 3 little ghost towns that are real close to each other here in western Oklahoma. And if you wonder why these places become ghost towns along Route 66, it's right behind me. So right here, immediately behind me is Route 66, and just across the grass, that's I-40. The major highways bypassing these small towns are the reason these small towns either no longer exist or there's very little remaining of them. So let's check out some Route 66 ghost towns in Oklahoma. I've always been fascinated with towns that are right on the boundaries of a state. I don't know if it's because I grew up near Cincinnati and that's basically 3 states there, right there near Cincinnati or part of Cincinnati. And Texola is the Route 66 version of that here in Oklahoma and Texas. There's other ones like Glen Rio, that's another one on Route 66 in New Mexico and Texas. But always kind of fascinated with these towns right on the border. Texola, early on, in the early days, they were trying to figure out the name, and it was Texola was one of them, and Texoma was another one, and they finally settled on Texola. And a typical Route 66 kind of story. It was on Route 66, and that helped it gain popularity and gain population. It was almost 600 people here. There was quite a town going on. I even read that they had a auditorium that could seat 300 people for live performances and things like that. And then as the I-40 got built about a half a mile from here, it bypassed the town and people stopped, coming through Texola. Fascinating place, lots of old crumbling buildings. And I've been here for about 30 minutes exploring, and there has not been one single car come through here, which is kind of sad, but also tells the story of why Texola at one point had 600 people and is now, in the latest census, at 43, which is actually an increase from 36. So maybe there's a little life in Texola yet. Hext, Oklahoma was never very big. In fact, it only had a post office for about a year in the early 1900s. There was a pretty famous book written about Route 66 in the 1940s of a guy who traveled it all the way through, and his comment about Hext was, it's nothing more than a small community with a gas station. And obviously the gas station is gone, but there's a significant school that was here, which is interesting if it's such a small community. It's a pretty large school, and there's also the only other building is a Baptist church. Of these towns on Route 66 I'm exploring today, Foss was the largest one. It was a town of about 1,000 people, so it was a major trading center on the railroad here. And then Route 66 happened, and so it kind of, Route 66 traffic was the main thing. There were some other towns that started popping up, so it started taking some of the population away. So it kind of solidified for decades, 500 people or so. And then an Air Force base was built not far from here. And so that, created a little bit more economic benefit. And then once that closed, the town dwindled into the population of the 100s in the 1970s. And since then, the population has been in the 100 to 200 range. And in the last census is at 101. So Foss is hanging on. There's still people here. There's a town. They still have a, proud history. But it's definitely getting smaller and is just a fraction of what it used to be. So that was a fun little trip down Route 66. Reminded me of when I went on the trip last year. If you want to see more of Route 66, I have a whole playlist of those videos where I went through every town, and you can really see why these towns got so much smaller and fell apart eventually. But it's a fascinating road trip if you ever want to take it. Definitely one I'd highly encourage.